You're watching East Asia Tonight on CNA. Our businesses in Japan's private sector now have to hire more workers with disabilities. The government is raising the minimum ratio in phases to 2.7% in 2026 from 2.5% right now. Well, the exact figure varies depending on a company's size, but firms that fail to meet targets can be fined. Well, CNA's Michio Ishida visits a manufacturer to find out how employing workers with disabilities benefits Japan's businesses.
37-year-old Hiroshi Yamashita started his first full-time job only a year ago at Japanese electronics maker Omron. Mr. Yamashita was a university student when he developed social anxiety disorder, which led to mood swings. He dropped out and became a recluse.
年齢的にも結構上の方に来てしまって将来このままだったらどうしようっていうのとか家族の心配とかもあって母が就労移行支援のその紹介を持ってきてくれてで見学に行ったりしてちょっと頑張ってみようかなというふうに思って。
An agent introduced Mr. Yamashita to Omron. The company has been employing workers with physical impairments for decades, but it only began hiring staff with mental disabilities in 2018, after government requirements covering their employment came into effect.
私たちも経験がなかったのでどのような障害の特性があってどういう仕事で活躍が期待できるのかということをいろんな形で勉強させていただきました。 IT 関係のソフトウェア開発についてはたくさんのいわゆる発達障害のメンバーが活躍されている事例をたくさんで教えていただいたのでじゃあ私たちの会社でできないかなということで検討を開始したと。
Ms. Uebara hired Mr. Yamashita as an intern in 2021, and 2 years later, he was given a full-time position as a software developer. His supervisor says he's a hard worker.
少しキーワードを出したら、それに対してすごく勉強して、この前も資格をね、もうびっくりするぐらい早く資格を取って合格しましたと。
The company now has about 260 staff with disabilities, including 20 with mental conditions. While businesses like Omron can receive government subsidies for hiring and training workers with disabilities, Japan's progress in creating inclusive workplaces has been slow. The private sector, on the average, has not reached the 2.3% target set by the government. There are several reasons for this. They are not sure what those with disabilities can do. They think their facilities are not suitable to their needs, and their employees in general are not willing to welcome them. But the climate is changing, according to one expert.
かつては障害は恥だとかそういう考え方もあったし、なるべくそういう人たちは表へ出さないように家の中に閉じ込めとくとか、そういう扱いもあったんですけども、でも最近はその点の偏見っていうのはだいぶなくなってきていると。知的障害的なあるいは発達障害的な人たちがいたとしてもそこまでジロジロ見たりとか違和感もなくなってきた。
Professor Nakajima, who has a son with disabilities, says firms can benefit from hiring these workers.
だけど発達障害と精神障害の人は結構集中してできるとか、だから業種によってはもう本当にニーズもあって実際に働いてもいるし、そういう方たちを企業に雇って戦力にしていくっていうのはなかなかそういろいろ工夫が必要なんですよね。
This 28-year-old who does not want to be named suffers from a developmental disorder. He majored in mechanical engineering at university, but he lacked social skills and could not get a job until he found out about a factory position at a subsidiary of Omron. He's now been working here as an engineer for 5 years.
出来がどんどんきれいになっていったりとか安定した動作ができるようになったり、周りからも作った設備を褒められているんで、それが嬉しいなと思っています。
He uses tools like an app to communicate his thoughts to his colleagues, and he's now an asset for the company. Government estimates show 9.2% of the population has some kind of disability as of 2023. The figure is expected to rise to 17% by the end of the decade, with the majority suffering from mental and intellectual disabilities. Assessing what they can do could be crucial for the future of Japan, which is facing a shrinking population. Michio Ishida, CNA, Kyoto.
And for more, Tai Tai, Chief of Gender Equality and Social Inclusion at the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific, joins us now from Bangkok. Well, thanks for joining us at this time, Tai Tai. So based on that story that we just heard there, how do you respond to some of the concerns that we heard from companies that they're not sure what people with disabilities can do, or that they even have the facilities that's suitable for their needs?
Yes, I think this is a major concern for most companies who consider it as an obligation to hire a person with disabilities. First, they consider them as not capable of functioning as a productive employees. Secondly, they think that there are not enough facilities which can accommodate person with disabilities. But I think the essential action here is for the CEOs or top leaderships of the companies to change their mindset. This is the major barriers for person with disabilities to function properly as any of us is not because of their disability, their impairment. It is the interaction between their impairment, whether it's a physical, mental, intellectual, with the environmental barriers. If they are given reasonable accommodation to enable them to unleash their potentials, they could be just as productive and could be even bringing more skills. We have noticed many of them are very talented at ICT and art, and they function very well as research managers. So it's essential to tap into these talents by companies. Thank you.
Also, Tata, based on the data and the reports that are out there, is there a sense that in Asia or East Asia specifically that there is less tolerance, that the chance of those with disabilities being left behind is just higher than the West?
I would not think it is a particular discrimination or bias in East Asia or in Asia. It's a global issue. That's why right now there's a global movement on disability inclusion. It is a universal issue. There's a emerging trend now by the corporate sector to formulate a lines to encourage the private sector to hire person with disabilities, championed by some major companies, so-called Valuable 500. And also there's a global ILO business disability and business network. So these comprises companies all over the world. They are all trying to tackle this issue. I would not agree there's more discrimination in Asia than the rest of the world.
And I'm glad you clarified that this is a universal, it's a global issue. What about gender disparity, though, among individuals with disabilities?
Yes, gender itself has been an issue. It has been there for several decades in terms of advocacy and movement. And now we see more and more female CEOs and leaders as well. But if you combine gender with disability, it becomes a major difficult issue because women with disabilities face more discriminations. It's a double jeopardy, if you say, not only in terms of daily life, but in workplace. So some particular discrimination combined, with gender and disability make it a particular difficult for them.
Also, not all societies are moving at the same pace on this development. What is a good starting point, your advice there, and where should emphasis be placed in terms of fostering greater understanding as well as inclusion?
A starting point would be really awareness raising toward fostering an inclusive culture. And we really need a whole of society approach, including the government, the top leadership of the government, the private sector, the CSOs, NGOs, and the schools all come together to talk about inclusion and diversity, and also, see the person with a disability as assets, not a burden, not a victim, not of subject of charity. So gradually you formulate this paradigm shift toward perceiving person with disabilities as active change agents, talent pool, and also they represent a huge consumer base. Globally, in terms of our population, 16% have some sort of disabilities. Combining with their families and their loved ones, you are talking about 3.4 billion people connected with disability. This is a huge consumer base. So we have to look at this in terms of both from the rights angle, rights of person with disabilities to participate in our society and economy fully and effectively, but also considered as an economic opportunity.
That's right, and still much more needs to be done for this group of individuals. Thanks so very much, Tsai Tsai from the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific.